You hear a lot of people also now conflating Cape independence with, oh, you want to bring apartheid back. The Western
Oh
Cape is
God, yeah.
majority colored, right? So what apartheid? Like, how are you going to get apartheid back in a majority colored area? And I will just like to say to people, if you live in Cape Town, and I'm sure many of the viewers probably don't live in Cape Town, and I come from the north, right? So I come from Limpopo, a place where no one actually got the memo that apartheid has ended. Then I moved to Pretoria, where people are sort of desperately trying to make the Rainbow Nation work, but no one really cares all that much about it. And one of the things that I found when I moved to Cape Town is the majority of people you meet have almost completely forgotten about the past of South Africa. The race relations in Cape Town specifically, especially between coloreds and white people, but also a lot of black people, is just normal, right? Like there's no real animosity, there's no real anger. People are friendly, people are friends. It sort of doesn't seem as bad as it was in the north, right? In the north, there were very clear distinctions made. And I'll use a silly example, but in the north, I remember whenever you went to a shop, right? So like Pick and Pay or Checkers, you would be met with two types of responses, most generally speaking. Every once in a while, you would meet someone that's very friendly and very nice, but most of the time, you'd meet two responses. You'd either get a cashier that won't look you in the eye, right? Almost this subservient submission. Oh, the boss is here kind of approach, or you would get someone that is extremely arrogant, and you're almost an imposition to them at the store. Like the fact that you're trying to buy from them is almost an imposition. And one of the things that I found immediately coming to Cape Town, and this entire thing, both responses, by the way, is born from the same thing. There's a lack of belief in the self. So there's a self-confidence issue there that either manifests itself in arrogance or manifests itself in this almost, just sort of begging to be noticed. You don't see that in Cape Town. You're an equal. You walk into the store and they treat you like an equal. They speak to you like an equal. And it was refreshing as hell to walk into a store and just see this colored lady treating me like a boy, like any Afrikaner woman would do. She was older than me. She was like in her 60s. And she was talking to me like a Tanny in her 60s would be talking to me, right? Because she's older, I'm younger. And you immediately go, wow, I didn't expect this. But why did it happen in Cape Town, and why is it not happening in the rest of the country? You see, in Cape Town, I don't believe it was ever really forced. I think it just sort of happened. You look at Cape Town schools, they're very mixed. Even the Afrikaans schools, you're like, wow, there's black kids coming out, there's colored kids coming out, there's white kids coming out, and everyone's just sort of going to school together. So it was just automatically melting together. In the north, it was very much forced. I know for a fact of a bunch of principals and headmasters of schools who fought desperately to try and keep English kids out of their schools. And the government came in and said, you will take these kids. Right? And these headmasters were like, every teacher I have is an Afrikaans teacher. Even the English teacher struggles to speak English. And now you want me to get English and Sepedi kids in here. How are we teaching them? Right? But this was forced. And so the force almost created this hatred, because now I'm being told what I can and cannot do rather than being respected. And so that's what I would want the Freedom Front Plus to start to focus on, is that it will be by your own choice, right? So if we're going to do federalism, it's not going to be a case of, well, you're Sepedi, go back to Limpopo. No.
Yeah.
If you're Sepedi and you want to live with other Sepedis, you can go to Limpopo. But if you want to live with, the most Afrikaner group you could ever imagine, and you like the way they do things, yeah, go live there. If they don't have a problem with it, go live there, right? And everyone will just sort of, I'm struggling to find the English word for this.
What you mean? Like integrate?
Yeah, but not by force, but by what's the English word when you're doing it of your own free will? But there's a nice English word for it.
Geez, I'm trying to think. Because all I would just say like, yeah,
voluntary.
You want to integrate, assimilate. Oh, volunteer. Okay.
Voluntary. It will be voluntary, right? Everyone will just
be voluntary.
Everyone will live where they want to live, where they feel most comfortable, and as long as it doesn't make an imposition. So if the Zulu Kingdom, for example, of KwaZulu-Natal said, hey, we don't care that Chris Pappas can speak Zulu, we don't want him to live in Zululand. That's their right. They have a right to say Zululand is for Zulus, right? And so the people of Orania have the right to say, if you're not Afrikaner and you're not Christian and you're not white, you can't live here. Great, that's your right. But someone else can form another town and they can just go, we want you to be a Christian and we want you to be a capitalist. That's our only requirement. We don't care about the race. And then what you'll have is sort of like the Americans, where you will have these different experiments that sort of pop up all over South Africa. And in about 50 years, we'll be able to see who did it best, right? Which parts are flourishing and which parts are struggling. And now we can start to borrow from one another, right? And different places can adopt and can adapt. So that's what I would like to see from the Freedom Front, is to explain that better to people. Because I think that's what the Freedom Front Plus wants. But I think they sometimes fail in explaining it.
Yeah, that's definitely possible. And your sort of journey, it's actually similar to mine in a way, because, well, I've been abroad quite a lot, but when I was living specifically in South Africa, I grew up in Mpumalanga on a farm, and then moved to the Joburg, well, Ekurhuleni, but for those who know, Ekurhuleni is basically Joburg. Like, you can't see where one begins and
all of Gauteng is basically Joburg. I mean, even Pretoria, it's like, I'm going from Pretoria to Joburg. When? Like, where does it start? It's just one big city at this point.
Yeah, it's one of those things. But yeah, like, basically the point is, like, coming then to this sort of side, and even just during my time in Joburg proper, you know, like actual city of Joburg, you just see how cosmopolitan it is. I guess that's where it's a little different to Pretoria, because like in Joburg, I feel like it's kind of like what you're describing in Cape Town, where you just don't really see, like, okay, maybe there's some people, but majority, you just don't really see a problem. And like, if I look at, for example, the different people who are dating, you see a lot of couples, mixed race couples getting together. You see friends sitting at a restaurant of different races. Like, it's not a big deal. And I guess it's similar to what you're saying in Cape Town, where because it's a cosmopolitan place and, you know, people are coming from all over the country to work and to live there, it's kind of just become that way, not because anybody forced it. It just naturally evolved. Nobody said, I'm going to go to Joburg because I'm, I don't know, Indian and I need a black wife. I don't know. Now I think I'm just talking nonsense, but
no,
nobody's like going there to force a point. They're just saying, I'm going there to work. I'm going there for whatever other reason, maybe because it's an exciting place. And as people just naturally move, they adapt and things change. So I just think it is very important that people have that sort of free will. I'm not sure how your plan will work. I guess maybe there could be a level of federalization, because I've actually been thinking a lot about that. And I'd actually like to ask you, because you brought up the Cape exit, but then you also spoke about federalization. And I've always been one that said, well, again, this is just my personal opinion, but I'm not from the Cape, but I'm like, I don't see how Cape independence can practically work. But federalism, where you basically have, you know, each province basically becoming a state, that's something that I'm thinking could work. But before I jump ahead, what is your opinion on, well, firstly, Cape independence, secondly, federalism? Which one do you think makes more sense in the South African context at this moment in time?
I am a fan of Cape independence as a very much last resort. So we have tried everything else and it isn't working. Great, let's go independent. But I have family that still live in the north, right? What the hell is that now going to do? Because I floated the idea of moving to Cape Town to my dad, and he was like, no. He likes Limpopo. He likes the Bosveld. He doesn't want to live in Cape Town. He says it's beautiful, but he says it makes him depressed. It's too green. He doesn't like it. He wants the Bushveld. So, for him, that's in his blood. That's where he was born in Brits. He lived in sort of like the Bushveld his entire life. So for him, that's what he loves. And so I don't understand the independence thing, because it's going to create this very messy divorce that I don't know how it's going to work. And I don't think it will in the long term, because ultimately people do want to live together. I think Joburg and Cape Town is great examples of that. The majority of South Africans don't want to live apart, right? There are, and I have no hate towards them, right? There are people who just want to live on their own with their own people, and you should be allowed to do that. It's a free world, and you should be freely able to choose that. But the majority of people do not want to do that. They do want to live together. They do want to be friends with people from different races. They want to date outside of their own race if that is what they choose to do, and they don't want restrictions on it. So last resort, maybe. In terms of federalism, not only do I think it can work, I think it's the only way South Africa works. I don't believe South Africa works from Pretoria. The National Party tried it. For almost 70 years, they tried desperately to run the country from, well, not 70 years, it was about 60 years, but they tried, and it didn't work, right? The British tried it from Pretoria. I'm conflating dates here, because the National Party tried it for almost 40 years. The British tried it for about 20, 30 years before that. You cannot govern South Africa from Pretoria, because the problems in Pretoria are not the same as the problems in Joburg. They're definitely not the same as the problems in KwaZulu-Natal. And they're not the same as the problems in Mpumalanga or Limpopo. Okay. So a government in Pretoria does not govern this country. It will never work. Federalism is the only way that it does actually work. By giving the provinces full power to do what they want to do. And for anyone that's thinking, so we're getting apartheid back. No, because the way federalism works is the government, the national government, has a constitution. The constitution sets the baseline. No province is allowed to circumvent the constitution. So if the constitution says that you can't have slavery, guess what? None of the provinces can bring back slavery. You can't have the Western Cape suddenly with millions of slaves being imported because the constitution says no slavery, right? And you have these provinces that's then able to fight against one another to figure out what is the best way to govern. And by fighting, I don't mean actual war. I mean, the Western Cape decides we're going to go full-blown capitalist. Joburg says we're going to go full-blown communist. And in 10, 15 years, you see which one works best, and people have the freedom to move, right? So those who don't want to live under communism, leave and go to the Western Cape. Those who want to live under communism, leave the Western Cape and go to Joburg. And that's how you figure it out.
I actually really like the explanation you gave. And I mean, I really have nothing more value to add. I think you summed it up perfectly, because ultimately it really does seem to be that ideal middle ground. You're still living under that same constitution. You've still got, that overarching, that national government, but you're doing sort of like the US, and you'll see that in practice. Like, the education department in, let's say, Gauteng will operate differently or independently of the education department in other provinces, policing. It can happen across multiple ministries. So I actually think it's a good thing. Like, it's a good thing to consider. And it's kind of sad that people don't talk about it enough. And I feel like sort of the Cape independence talk has overtaken it, where you basically have everybody saying either, no, we need one South Africa, or no, we need Cape independence. Whereas it's kind of like, guys, there's this middle ground that can work really well if we just give it a bit of attention and maybe think on this. So yeah, I really like that.
Well, I'll make this prediction for anyone that wants to say, no, we need one South Africa. The inevitable result of a one South Africa is civil war. and it will happen within the next decade. South Africa will go to civil war because there's too many different cultures living completely separate lives. And each of these cultures believe that they're doing it right. So you can't have one government telling the Zulu, you're wrong, we're all going to do it this way, right? But you can't also have one single government telling the Afrikaner, you're wrong, you have to be doing it like the Zulus do it. Because guess what? If they choose the Zulu, there's 11 other cultures that's going, what the hell, bro? I don't want to do it that way. So it just can't work. You need a system where people are and I think our provinces should be redrawn as well, just FYI. I think our provinces don't make a lot of sense. Now the provinces should be drawn in such a way that it is possible for every group to govern themselves if that is what they choose to do.